Perfect. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate it. I just want to go ahead and get started. So go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you know, my name is John. I'm very interested in this position. I'm currently a full-time stay-at-home parent and a part-time student. I'm studying data analytics and
Okay.
accounting. I haven't really made up my mind which one I want to do yet.
They're very
So
different, but they have similar threads. So
they do. I'm all about the data for myself.
more of a
whether it's
numbers kind of guy.
financial or not. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. As far as so something we're looking for with this position is someone who can really take charge and show some initiative. That's really important for us since we are a little bit more startup. So I want you to kind of tell me an example of when you feel like you showed that initiative.
Sure. Most of my work currently is at home. So a good example that I have of showing initiative is, so I have a stepdaughter. And she was getting old enough she kind of needed her own space, her own room.
Uh huh.
We were pretty limited in how many rooms we had available. So
Right.
um, I decided, just kind of on my own, that I was going to convert what was the office into her bedroom.
So an office room, convert that into a separate bedroom.
Mm-hmm. The main
Right.
challenge, of course, being what are we going to do with all the office stuff?
Right.
So I laid out a plan for what I was going to do with the office stuff. And on a day when we didn't have her, she was with her biological father. I went ahead, got to work, and I moved all the furniture. It took about 2 days.
Oh wow.
And it was a nice surprise for her, though. When we got her back, she had her own bedroom, and we had kind of a living room office situation. And it's actually been working out really well for us.
That's really cute. How old is she?
She's 8.
Oh, that's super fun. And did she like having her own space?
Very much. It's the first place she goes to when she gets back from school.
I understand. Okay. As far as I appreciate that example of initiative, but something else I kind of want to talk to you about is things about criticism. So, what was the most useful criticism you ever received from an immediate supervisor, whether that's a team lead or a direct supervisor? How did you embrace that feedback? How did you handle that?
Well, at the time, not very well. But the most memorable feedback, criticism-wise, I ever received was from my ethics and values professor, actually. It was a few years ago in school, and I remember he pulled me aside, and he said, "Hey, you have some real talent." I said, "Oh, thank you." He's like, "No, you misunderstand. I think it's a shame that you haven't developed your talent." And at the time, I was kind of taken aback. I'm like, wait, I thought this was a compliment.
Right.
And that was all he said. He just kind of went on his way. There were other students there, and but I really took that to heart. And that was the day that I decided that putting in an honest effort, taking the time to develop talents, that mattered. I couldn't just keep coasting by on like, oh, yeah, I can get the passing grade. I'm here. It's like, no, if I have strengths, I have to do something with that, and not just take them for granted.
So do you feel like that pushes you beyond just what's considered standard?
Absolutely. At least for my own standards for myself. That was a turning point for me.
Okay. Okay, that's an awesome answer. I can understand why you'd be confused with the with the response he gave you. Tell me about a time when you didn't agree with a corporate strategy or initiative or standard. What was that strategy? Why didn't you agree with it, and what did you end up doing with that?
So while I worked as an intern for a company called Millenniata, a lot of what I did was data collection at that point. So I was the lowest guy in terms of authority working there.
Kind of fetching coffee kind of deal.
Almost, not quite fetching coffee, but almost. And they were having a meeting. All of the higher, kind of the corporate leaders, including the CEO, they were meeting and discussing what direction to take the company. They had a pretty solid product at that point, but they needed to settle on their market. Their products, what we worked on was data disks, so we could archive a lot of information.
Like CDs.
Mm-hmm. But they were kind of specialty. So it wasn't something that you could just pull off the shelf, stick in any computer, and expect to work properly. You needed the proper equipment to use them. And Sony had a disc reader that worked for it. A few other companies did as well. But if you didn't have those, it wouldn't work. The company still wanted to take it onto the shelves. So they were kind of faced with a decision: do we focus on kind of big contracts like with government agencies, libraries, schools, and secure a large volume with those companies or with those groups? Or do we try to chase all the markets and try to get it on the shelves and do like advertising?
Like Walmart
and
consumerism kind of thing?
Exactly.
Okay.
And in my opinion, the smart move and really the only option for us at that time with the small size of the company was to hound after those contracts. We could guarantee then that those organizations had the equipment they needed and we could work with them on a more one-on-one basis.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask me, our product was just not ready for shelves. That wasn't the direction the company took it. The CEO kind of made up his mind. But I discussed with my immediate superiors kind of while we were on our own. I apologize for taking so long on this question, but this is important for me.
Yeah.
I encouraged them. I said, hey, I think this is a bad move. I think we should really focus on securing major customers and clients as opposed to trying to just take on the whole market.
Right. Kind of stay within that niche and expand.
Exactly. And I wasn't a marketing guy. I wasn't high up on the food chain, so didn't really expect anyone to listen to me. But my immediate supervisors did, and we all kind of agreed. CEO went another direction, and consequently, they are no longer in business.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah. Can't say it was just because of that, but I felt like they tried to tackle a little more than they could handle at the time.
Yeah, that
rather
makes
than
sense.
picking a direction and sticking with it.
Yeah, keeping it consistent and finding that niche. Okay. We do tend to be a little bit more niche, so that feedback is really appreciated. How did you handle it did you ever talk to your direct supervisor about it?
My direct supervisor, yes.
I apologize, the CEO?
I kind of passed along my input, and we talked among ourselves. Then they presented it to him. But he had already made up his mind.
Yeah, sometimes there's no changing it, but consequences to actions, that makes sense. Okay, moving on. Describe a time when you elevated the level of value you brought to a customer or a client with Millenniata that you mentioned over time. How did you accomplish that? Or, any example?
Sure. Probably the best example is when I was working in pizza, actually.
Really?
Yeah, this was a while ago. But
not quite numbers.
Not quite. This was before I found my own personal niche.
Okay.
Before I realized I was a numbers guy. I was happy to have any work I could have at the time. So I was in pizza, but rather than just sticking with like one role, I did do my best to kind of take on multiple roles, if that makes sense. So I was trained in one position.
Right.
And then I sought out training in 2 or 3 other positions on top of that.
Okay.
I still picked a specialty, but I was able to be, after all of that training, I was able to be flexible. So whatever was needed at the time, I was able to step in, which was important because we would often be short-staffed.
Yeah.
And customers don't care if you're short-staffed. They just want their products. And so, they got to have their pizza. But because I did that, I was actually able to do the work essentially of 1.5 to 2 people while I was on call. And so, I could handle the ovens and I could jump on the register sometimes when I needed to. And that was a big deal. It kept the line moving.
Yeah.
And eventually actually led to a promotion. So that was nice.
Excellent, yeah.
It's nice when management recognizes, hey, you're stepping up. We can work with that.
Absolutely. No, I've had many jobs where I've been recognized for those achievements and where I haven't been. So it's nice to feel like your management's able to support you with that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you recall a time when you were less than pleased with your own performance? And what did you do about that?
I'm trying to think of a good example for that. I mean, I have examples. There are a lot of times when I've been maybe less than optimal. Probably a good example would be my first job, which it's your first job. Like,
right.
You're never going to do great. They kind of expect you not to stick around. But Before I got into pizza, I tried doing more traditional fast food. So I would work at Subway, making sandwiches. Um, but it turns out that in order to be efficient at making sandwiches, you have to be quick with your fingers. And what I found out the hard way was I kind of struggle with like fine motor control. And so if it's kind of broader movements or things, even down to like, obviously I use a keyboard a lot, I can do that. But I make a lot of mistakes. I'm constantly having to backspace.
Mm-hmm.
In making sandwiches, as dull as it sounds, and as basic and elementary a task as it is, I struggled. And my supervisor was patient with me. The customers sometimes were patient with me. But a lot of the time I felt like I was just holding people up. And even after completing my training and staying there for a week past that, I just was not able to bring up my speed. I fumbled with the ingredients a lot. So rather than stick around and, oh, just bear with me, just be patient, I'll get to you, I decided, there's got to be a better fit for me.
Yeah.
So I moved on, and I appreciated my supervisor being patient, but I wanted to find a position that I was better suited to.
Okay. So with this job, this is a positive environment, but we do tend to be a little bit competitive. We have frequent like competitions for fun with prizes and gift cards and stuff. So describe your level of competitiveness. Especially, I want you to tell me about a specific situation where you feel like that sense of competitiveness helped you to achieve what you wanted to, or what you a better result than without that competitiveness.
Absolutely. Personally, I tend to shy away from head-to-head competition, but I am very competitive. I like to bring my A game, so to speak, when the spotlight is not on me, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And a good example, I like to come in maybe on the weekends, or I like to stay a little late and help out in a way that maybe wasn't expected of me, but was still very much appreciated. And so in that way, I give myself an edge over a lot of my peers.
Okay.
I'm not usually the guy scrambling to get that gift card per se. I still will show up, do my work appropriately, of course.
Right.
But what really drives me is getting the that kind of surprise. Oh, I wasn't expecting you to do that, and you did, and I really appreciate that. There was a time while I was working at Millenniata, I came in over the weekends, no one else was there, and I cleaned the break room. It had been slowly deteriorating over time, and it wasn't really anyone's job to clean it. It was just kind of the break room, but it was getting pretty bad. So I came in and I cleaned house. There was expired food. There was like old coffee pots, and I'm like, I'm here. I can do this. No one else is gonna do it. And so I did. It was outside of my usual scope of expectations, but it was very rewarding the following Monday when people came in and said, wait a minute, this is nice, this is clean. I kind of sat there, like, yeah, it is.
You're welcome.
That was me. So I don't know if that's competition per se, but that's the way that I like, that's what I like to bring to the table, that it maybe gives me an edge over my peers.
Okay.
I'll do that odd job, or I'll show up in a way they weren't expecting.
Okay. I want you to think of an example when one of your customers wasn't pleased with something you or your team did. I kind of explain that to me. What did you guys do? What was the situation? How did you guys respond?
Sure. For a time, a couple of years, I actually ran my own laser engraving business.
Interesting.
And
okay.
It was never very profitable, but it was an adventure, and I learned a lot about myself. There frequently, though, would be clients or customers who, hey, we want this thing, can you please make it for us? You deliver it, and they're either not happy with it, or it breaks, or something goes wrong.
Okay.
There was one time, almost as a favor to a friend, his younger brother wanted a wooden sword, which is a little bit outside the typical scope of laser engraving, but I was able to make him one. I told him, hey, this is mostly ornamental, like don't hit people with it, which his parents appreciated me telling him.
Right.
But within 72 hours of him receiving this like ornamental sword, he broke it. He was hitting furniture with it and he broke it. So he talks to me. He says, "Hey, is there anything you can do about that?" At the time, I couldn't replace it. It was kind of too expensive for me to replace the whole thing. But I did work with him and offered to repair it for free. I kind of did it at my convenience when I had time. But at the end of it all, he was satisfied with the piece, and I was satisfied with the work that I did.
And
So-
hopefully he stopped hitting furniture with it.
I can only hope. That would be probably a good example of when a client wasn't happy, but we were still able to work through it and make sure both parties were satisfied.
Okay. And when you say laser engraving, do you mean like on like wood or plastic or?
Typically wood. It was a big machine that my father owned actually, so I had access to it, but I didn't own it.
Okay.
But I rented it from him. And yeah, it had a bed, maybe this big, and a bunch of tubes and stuff. And so it would engrave from the top, and you would have to work with a program and design everything and lay it all out. And put the wood in there, cover it up. And so I thought it was fun. And so
That's so cool. I've never dealt with any of those big machines. That sounds like a lot of fun.
it's fun. It can be frustrating sometimes, but it's fun.
Okay. Last question. I want you to describe a corporate strategy or resource which you maximize to have a positive impact on your business.
Sure. When I came in to Millenniata, which is where I really got my start into data collecting and everything, I was an intern, but I was also filling in for someone who had been working there. They stuck around for about a week, they trained me in the position, and then they were gone. And so I was kind of filling someone else's shoes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the way that they had been doing things, particularly transferring the data between computers and between networks, was remarkably inefficient. They were still using a very old machine to collect the data, kind of by necessity. But as a result, they were using floppy disks to try to transfer the data from that old machine.
Really?
Yes, it was a dinosaur. It was...
I have not seen a floppy disk since I was a kid.
Yeah, it was special. But that particular machine could interface with the data collecting devices that we had, where we would measure all kinds of readings and things on the data disks that we made.
Like what kind?
So mostly quality control.
Okay.
We had to make sure that it passed certain levels of quality and inspection. That was our claim to fame was, hey, our disks will last 100 years if you treat them right. But we had to make sure that they wrote correctly and that the data was all there. Anyways, so I very quickly realized, I completed my training, made sure I wasn't going to be like overstepping myself. But I very quickly proposed a different way of transferring data. It required a little bit more work from me, but it was a lot more efficient than trying to write onto a floppy disk maybe once or twice a week. And that would take hours sometimes. And then try to get that off of a floppy disk into a format that the other employees, mostly engineers, could read. I kind of streamlined that process. Like this, we can do better.
You mean you showed them there's other ways to work things besides floppy disks?
To be fair, it mostly, the improvement relied a lot more on the person kind of running the machines, taking the time to enter in the data manually.
Okay.
So I can see why the person who was there before me didn't do that. But I was very proficient with it with a 10 key. Data entry was kind of my thing a little bit already. 2 weeks into that, and I did hundreds of lines of data, and I almost never made a mistake. So, I mean, that was the downside. A lot more manual entry. But then it was already in spreadsheets ready to be analyzed and worked with. So it saved the engineers, who were getting paid a lot more than I was, saved them a lot of time.
Okay.
So,
I appreciate that. that's all I had. So I want to ask before we kind of wrap this up. Did you have any questions as far as like the company or just housekeeping stuff or anything?
I suppose. When can I expect to hear from you?
So typically, Chanel, what will happen is me and the other managers will talk, and then Chanel, she was the one that reached out to you about the opportunity. She'll either call you or email you with the information. You guys have been emailing back and forth, right? Yeah. So she'll probably email you within a couple days to let you know either way. And if you do have the position, which I really feel like you'd fit in really well here. But I'm not going to say anything for sure because I do have to talk with the other managers. But essentially, she'll email you, and if we are going to go ahead and move forward, she'll work with you to get paperwork at that point.
Perfect. Would it be all right if I reached out in maybe a week if I haven't heard back from you?
Yeah, that would be perfect. Yeah, go ahead and just email her, and she'll let you know.
Sounds good. Well, I really appreciate you having me here, and I appreciate your time.
Perfect. Thank you.